Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Patrick Handley from Waterscapes Australia. Now, Patrick owns Waterscapes Australia and also started Aquascapes Australia and was the first person to start importing their products, the Aquascape products from the US. And I think it's a phenomenal set of products that you can use to build ponds and waterfalls. So we do talk about that a bit in this chat. And these types of natural waterfalls and ponds are something I've found a passion for in the last couple of years. I would just thoroughly enjoy talking to Patrick about it. And even though the episode goes for just under an hour, there was a couple of things that I forgot to even talk to him about, and they're kind of big deals. But we were just talking about so many other things that was fascinating that I lost my train of thought. But so things that we didn't talk about in this chat was that he's gone over to America to help build a natural water feature for Shaq, so Shaquille O'Neal, and he's also been named the Aquascape Artist of the Year, which is an international award. So I think he might be the only Australian to have won that as well. So a couple of big talking points, and I didn't even get to that because there was just so many other cool things to talk about, and he's got a clear passion for what he does. And I particularly loved when he spoke about something that I've spoken about a lot, which is how he treats each project like it's the first project so that there's the passion for the client and you're not just treating it like a job. But I couldn't recommend that thought process more highly. And it's something I need to continue to reaffirm to myself. So, yeah, awesome chat with Patrick. So, hopefully, you enjoy this chat with Patrick Handley. Patrick, thank you for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Well, it's a bit of a sort of a convoluted tale of what I was up to. I mean, I'm a horticulture background, studied horticulture in Queensland Uni. And then I did a multitude of different jobs. I was working in different things and ended up going overseas actually and working in Ecuador for about, I went for 6 months, but ended up being there for 7 years, working in horticulture and more sustainable agriculture, I suppose, is my other side of things, permaculture to a degree, or, conscious design of edible landscapes. And I did a little bit of dam building and things like that there. And then as things happened, I met a Canadian. Ended up in Canada in 2001. So I was in Ecuador from 94 to 2001 and was like, okay, now what? I went from this environment where anything was possible, it was pretty wild, to Ontario, Canada, which is very conservative. And it was like, okay, what do I do now? And the family had a friend who built water features. And I said, okay, well, that sounds, I always liked building. I always liked rock and water. I spent so much time in creeks as a kid that sounds really good. And I just started working for him, actually, for McKinnon Ponds, it was called, near Burlington. And it was okay. I enjoyed it. But then there came to a point where there's so much concrete in this, and you're trying to make it up, and you're spending a lot of time in places like what's it called, Home Depot over there, or plumbing stores, trying to find things to make it work. And we all know once you leave a job site that you've pretty much lost 4 hours of the job, sort of thing, So I just thought there'd be a better way. There had to be a better way. And I just through landscape meetings and associations, I heard of Aquascape, which is a Chicago-based company. And that was Greg Whitstock, the pond guy, and there's Ed and there's Brian. And they had been going for a few years. And so I just thought, okay, well, let's go have a look at it. So I went down to one of their yearly meetups, which like there's 500 or 600 pond builders get together. You couldn't think about it in Australia. It was like they were just pond builders. And these are very elaborate affairs, but they're educational as well. And it really opened my eyes to the potential and possibility of what was actually possible to do. It was really incredible, actually. And I had this little light bulb moment at that point, and I had a company in Canada called Unique Ponds. I made it that way, and I was building in the old way, concrete and holes in the ground. And I just transformed it around, and I did a lot of construction as well. I was doing paving and everything you had to do to make a living. It was a successful company. I was doing well, but I just love water features. Or natural water features being the point. So I started doing it. I went to one of their pond builds, which is a day event where you get 20 guys together and you build a pond. And it was incredible. I just sort of blew me away that you could accomplish so much in one day. Like, these are big ponds, these are like 10 by 15 ponds with waterfalls and the whole system, and tons and tons and tons of rock, and what you can accomplish. But not just that, it was the ability to be able to do that and to see that it is possible, which just sort of blew my mind a little bit, So and then sort of around that time, it was just like this light bulb moment I kept building them there, and but at that time I just sort of had that body shake. I think some people go through this when they sort of feel something, when something happens and they just see this like a lightning bolt, and I just had it was like a light bulb. So and a body shake, and it was like, wow, I'm gonna take this to Australia. I don't know how, but that's my program, that's what I'm going to do. And I want to build, and I want to introduce other guys to it, because it's just a fantastic way of building, and also a really good lifestyle. It's really satisfying. That's the main thing I found about it, was so satisfying. So I worked a few more years, went through a bit of turmoil with my relationship, and ended up coming back to Australia in 2007, 2008. I'd come back over the wintertime, Christmas, when it was snowing over there and we shut down, and did a bit of a tour of Australia just to see what condition the industry was in Australia and what was happening, and just found it, yeah, it was just very European based, which is obvious that we're sort of, because that's sort of, I suppose, our most contact in a way. So the pump in the bottom and the hole in the ground and rocks around the edge, and not much else, not a lot of thought, I suppose, put into how it actually functions and why. And so it was a bit of an uphill battle. I just realised, because one thing that hit me once, I was in a meeting with a developer, I suppose, and this is in Melbourne, because I was doing the rounds talking to people, and I sort of went into a bit of a presentation about how we could work together maybe, and they just stopped me pretty much in the beginning. Well, there's a group of us, and they stopped us at the beginning of the thing and said, you know what, this isn't really going to work. All Australians want is a bit of lawn and a barbecue. That's a so, and it was like, I mean, any landscape, put the heckles up on any landscaper or a landscape architect or whatever, and it was like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun in Australia, trying to get this through. So
It sounds like 1980.
yes. Well, this was 2000. When was this? Well, it would have been 2007, but yeah, pretty much 1980. Yeah, that was the feeling. And I said, okay, fine. So I just sort of bought a truck and a wheelbarrow, and I had, I was doing $500,000 in Canada, sort of thing, turnover really good. And I just had to sell everything, came back with very little after everything that happened, just relationship wise, and then just started again. So it was like a truck and a wheelbarrow, and I just said, okay, well, one pond at a time. I'll call myself Waterscapes Australia. I'll do our job anywhere in Australia, and just start building them. And, it's, I suppose, the philosophy being build it and they will come, which, has different branches going from it. People will come and see them and want them, but also you're also providing for animals, because they are in our environment as well, because they're really, they're a bonus in the landscape. They're a supportive feature, I suppose, to a landscape, so it's what I felt. Another thing I encountered was being told, well, why would we want ponds when Australia is so dry? I mean, it really depends where you're living, I suppose. We've had some pretty intense times recently, and my response, I had to think about that a little bit. And I said, well, no matter how dry it gets, the drier it gets, the more people will want water around them, because that's a necessity. We want to be around oasis. We want to bring it in. So if you do it efficiently, like power wise and water consumption wise, and just also thoughtfulness, I suppose, in the placement, there will always be a demand, I think. And I could see it growing. At that time, I think Australia was still caught up in the fountain type thing, the bowls, the very artificial, the concrete pond, the things like that. And again, I could see this thing, because there was a grassroots thing growing about people wanting to return back to nature. And it was sort of more of a hippie thing, I suppose, in the early times, where people were starting to there was a big demand, but now it's becoming more and more mainstream. People want to bring that back into their lives, because they've got such a busy life. They want to be able to come home and just sit down and enjoy something, which, is like a fire. When you have a waterfall, it's like a fire. You'll sit there and watch it for hours, because it's, especially if you put lighting on it, becomes this thing which calms you, and you can meditate to them even if you wanted to, So the demand grew. It was intense, I suppose, and everything I earned, I just put back into it. I started with absolutely nothing in Australia again. So it was just everything I earned, I just put back into it, and Waterscapes grew and grew, I suppose, to an extent, but our experience grew as well. And then at a certain point, I think it was 2014, I split the company into two. So I had Waterscapes, so I was bringing gear in, importing and using it, and then also selling to a few landscapers and DIYers and things that wanted to do things, who are, I suppose, social media had a big part of this. It was YouTube, and also the invent of Facebook at the time. It just made it possible to get it out in front of people, and people started looking for inspiration. And so from there, you could always see when there was a jump in technology, actually. Like Australia, wouldn't believe it was pretty at the other end of services when it came to, I had better internet service in Ecuador than I did in Australia, and I learned more about that in Australia. It was pretty crazy. So, I mean, but as the technology sort of jumped, you could see people finding these things that inspired them and wanting them. And, I designed my own websites and I did my own shopping sites and all the rest of it just to make something that happens, that made it available for people to find, I suppose, So, and in 14, I split them into two. So I have Waterscapes Australia, which is the construction and was design as well. And then I have Aquascape Australia, or Aquascape Supplies Australia, which is purely pretty much education for contractors, as well as providing the materials we need to build it, the equipment, the pumps, and the liner as well. We're also the Australian distributor for Firestone, or was Firestone, it's now called Elevate liners. The EPDM rubber liners is what we use under all of our builds. We don't use any concrete. So for me, there's a few perfect storms as well. I had key employees come in, from different things that happened in Australia at pivotal points, and they were sort of massive learning curves for me, for just, to build a team, I suppose, around me that could help me, because up until that point, it was probably 7 to 8 to 9 years. It was just pretty much me just pushing it through. Probably longer than that, 10 years, I reckon. So, yeah. And then bringing key people in and building a really efficient and no bullshit team around me, who are just sort of focused on doing the right thing, providing good information to people and providing that sort of supply line for people as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a massive thing having the right employees, because you can do everything by yourself, but it's going to wear you out quicker. Your body will break down and you sort of get burnt out. Whereas if you've got other people who have got the same passion or a similar passion and actually you can trust, that's how you can actually grow your business and enjoy it.
Yes, and that is a tough one, because I mean, I've gone through, I've had wonderful people working for me, they're really good guys, and because of what we're in, it's very artistic. So a lot of them are musos or some kind of arty thing, and it was always a bit hard because of very creative, but also, not all that dependable all the time, sort of thing. So it's sort of this thing that sort of had to juggle. But in the aquascape side of it, yes, they're very key professional people. In the building side of it, I found after a few years that I didn't want to be and this is probably a different way I'm going about it now, because I was also training people. So when I'd have people working for me and they work to a certain point and they go and do their own thing. And I was like, okay, that's fair enough. They're trained up and I appreciate that. And I started to think about it. I didn't want to run it's not that I didn't, I just didn't like the human resources side of it. So I was dealing more with business stuff rather than the creative stuff, which I really enjoy. And so for me, I had to think about it. It took me some years to get it right, but I still do projects, but I haven't got, in Waterscapes, I actually don't have employees as such. I have subcontractors, and they get plenty of work. There's so much work around in this industry right now, and what we do in what we do. And there is no IP. We don't sort of say, no, you can't know what we actually share everything. It's like, yes, learn more. There's no holding back, We're there to help because we want to see them done right. I mean, it affects the industry if they're not done right, So I was very supportive of new guys that are kind of scared to go out on their own, but it does give you a sense of freedom once you nail it, I suppose, and you can actually realize your artistic ability and make a living out of it as well. So supporting those guys to do it. Ben Harris was one of the first guys. Ben Harris Gardens. He's in Melbourne there. He was one of the first ones that sort of approached me as wanting to really get into it back in 13, I think it was 12, 13. And then from there, we've probably got about 40, I think, certified aquascape contractors in Australia now who've been through a bit of a training process, who really know their stuff and can really build well. And so I draw on that pool now to build. And then even you guys coming in, I'll have them come and work on a project with the guys who know what they're doing, and they learn so much, So, which brings me to a point as well. It's on projects. We get a lot of people who say, oh, no, I can build. And what I say is, it's really key just to get one guy in on the project, if that's all that you are able to do, just to assist with the build, because you'll get it right for a start, especially if it's for a client. If it's your own place, fair enough, practice, and it's great. And we encourage that. If you're doing it for a client, you want to nail it the first time. So to get someone in to learn those little tricks and and to upskill, I suppose, their employees that way, the next one's going to be a lot easier, and off they go. So that's sort of a recommendation we do with what we do, because it is a specialized field, So I'd do the same if I was doing a project and want to learn something out of it and get it right. I'd bring someone who knows what they're doing to actually show us what to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. I spoke to Ben Hutchison one day about like just about the complexity of some of the water features that he does, and he was telling me like something that you wouldn't expect when you've got your rock that's like a waterfall for the water to fly over. He said sometimes it's better having it leaning backwards to allow the water to build up and then fly over, whereas you naturally think you have it leaning forward to get the water flowing. But yeah, it's just little things like that. If you get someone who knows what they're doing, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, there's so much. It's pretty incredible. It's all things about flow, how much water in flow, how big your reservoir's got to be if you do pondless. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes is a big pond up the top, a creek, and then a small pond down the bottom, and there's not enough water in the system to actually run it. You've got to fill it up, and when the pump goes off or turn it off, it overflows, and you've got to fill it up again to get it going again. There's all these little things, and how different rocks, how water flows off a rock, be it a curved rock or a cut or whatever. We don't put a rock directly on top of the liner when we're building. We put it in front of a waterfall, and the water, so it just, rather than like a top waterfall rock, it sits in front of the liner, and the line is a little bit down from the top of it, and then your water goes over it. There's different ways of thinking, and we don't use concrete. We use like waterfall foam and expansion foams and things like that. So, and they just make it possible to build and seal them really well, because we're using very efficient pumps, and you want all that water to go over the waterfall. So there's these little techniques involved, and there's so many of them. I sort of don't realize myself sometimes until you start trying to show someone. so yeah.
And being in Canada when you're doing the concrete ones, because I know in regards to the paving, they don't use a lot of concrete in North America, especially when there's the freeze thaw issue. So I imagine that would be even worse with water, is it?
Yeah, well, they still use liner. It was sort of like I'm talking about the waterfall area, I suppose. What we used to do, which is, when I'm thinking back of it, was absolutely crazy. You dig a hole, and we dig it all by hand. You're digging these massive things. It might be, we had like 3 or 4 ton trailers, and you'd barrow the whole pond out. I might do 3 or 4 trailers, and it's all done by shovel. But then we put a liner in, and then the waterfall would be stacks of rock, like pyramids, I suppose, which is another technique we get away from. It's like water running naturally comes from a area that's just wider than itself. It doesn't come from a pyramid, So, but anyway, the point was, we were sort of sticking them all up and doing them and mortaring in between everything to make it sort of, that was the effect. And they always cracked. You're right. I mean, you have to do, if you're going to do a concrete pond in North America, you need a very, very good footing, and a treatment of the concrete for it to not crack. And we find that in Australia a lot. We're still building in concrete, some people. And I think, and actually what the technique is, you actually put a liner down first and build the concrete over the top, because you always know the concrete's going to leak. So we did away with the concrete, and we just use rocks because they move. And yes, Canada has massive movement in the ground. It freezes and swells, and then it contracts, and then it releases, or swells and then contracts, I suppose, with the weather, doesn't it? So we have the same thing in Australia with the wet and the dry. The soil swells in the wet and then dries out again. So much movement. So the liner that we do use is it's an EPDM rubber, and it's got 300% stretch, so it'll stretch with the moving of the ground. So you've always got that leeway there. We protect it very well with geotextile, but just gives you a really good flexibility for shapes as well, because it's kind of like paper in a way, but thick paper, but it's very pliable. So yeah.
So how did you go about getting the work when you came back to Australia? Like what sort of techniques were you doing to drum that up?
Yeah, it was social media. I think I started my social media page in 2008 or 9, I think it was initially. So it was sort of that, and then I just went out and talked to people a lot of times as well. I just found that it was like, if I needed some work or I was looking for something, I'd just go out and actually make contact and start to move around and talk with the industry. And it just appeared, I was sort of thinking, it was always people who you wouldn't expect either. It was like very, very sort of just salt of the earth people who wanted something natural in the backyard, So these aren't expensive sort of houses we were dealing with. They're people who just want to bring that back into their life again. So through social media, through word of mouth, just talking with landscape yards and just saying what I can offer, and it just started to develop like that. But the social media was key, just getting it out there. So and YouTube and all those things. I mean, they're evergreen marketing. They're amazing. If you make that effort to put yourself out there, you get so many people I still forget about that YouTube's there. Like, I saw you on YouTube, and I was, that's right. I keep forgetting it's there, but it just keeps on giving, The other thing I did in the early days, and this was a little bit later, probably 2012, was garden shows. Because we're on the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, we have the Queensland Garden Expo in Nambour. And I started doing those in 2012. And with a fantastic, like, people again, the ones we did there are very, I look back at them now, and I realize on those trade shows and things, it's about doing something a little bit different, doing something that people could imagine maybe in their backyard, but also inspiring them. So, and I think it was just the point of difference that we were doing water, incorporating some structures. We did some fantastic things like the Fountain of Youth, and we did like a hobbit hole one year, and then I remember having another one where it was a big tree with copper coming up, with water coming down. And I think from those, I realized it was sometimes 3 or 4 years later, we saw you at the garden show, we've been saving up our money, and we'd really like you to come and build us a creek, So it was, okay, great. Yeah, it's good. So it was just putting myself out there as much as possible and reinvesting. I reinvested everything back into just being there and being available and doing projects and putting it back into a little bit of marketing as well, I suppose. I didn't do much SEO, sorry. It was more, it really was just the social media, garden shows, and personal contact with suppliers and supply yards and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, the first time I saw a pondless waterfall was Ben Harris, because I did a garden at Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, and I came third, and Ben Harris came second in that same competition, and he had a pondless waterfall in that one, and I didn't understand how it worked at the time.
I worked on that one as well with him.
All
so
right.
yeah, so we did that, and the pondless is all, we couldn't dig in the ground at that because you know how it is. So the actual reservoir was just 25 mil high across the whole bottom of it. There was quite, and it was on a little bit of a slope, so it was a bit of a thing to work out, because it's working again with water inflow. How much water inflow, and you need twice the amount in the reservoir. So, but I love that was a great project. That one, nice horsetail waterfall, big stone. Yeah.
So what does horsetail mean? Does that mean
just narrow, a narrow drop. So imagine a horsetail has got that effect and that same kind. You see it a lot in Asian or Japanese sort of waterfalls as well. So yeah, we have different names for waterfalls and different names for rocks as well, like biggie, smallies, and well, these things, and different, like scurries. I suppose scurry is another favorite one, where water sort of moves between stone. It's not like a waterfall as such. So and you kind of develop a bit of when we build, and with a crew that are experienced, there's not a lot of talk going on about what are we going to do next. Everyone knows what we're going to do next, and we say, oh, can you get me this type of rock, which is like you say they have a name for it, and the other person will just grab it and bring it over, or we're going to build this kind of waterfall. We're all on the same page with it, and then the other one person is really skilled at doing the plumbing, and off they go, and just there's really no organizing. It goes so quickly because everyone just moves ahead, and it's a bit of a I don't know, the drive is to get the water flowing so you can see what you created and see if it's actually come out, the way you envisioned it to be. So yeah, so it's really quite addictive, really. So,
yeah, it's really good. It'd be really good camaraderie as well, because he's got the same passion working on a project too.
Yeah, and the satisfaction, it's really special. There's so many different things. We travel a lot, so there's a lot of travel involved. So now I do projects all over Australia. I'm moving into overseas, Hong Kong and Middle East as well. And the guys are all excited because I'll be coming along too, and it's how fantastic for guys in their 20s who are really good at what they do to be able to travel and earn really good money at what they do because they are artists, and to go and experience these places, not as a tourist, but for a reason to be going there. So it's pretty incredible, actually. I think about it sometimes. So
yeah. I went up to Caloundra to work, or the Sunshine Coast, to work for a couple of weeks several years ago, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. Let alone because you got one in Indonesia. Well, that was towards the end of last year. I saw you working on.
Yeah, well, that one we haven't finished that one yet because they're having trouble getting enough water to actually fill it. They just dug it. That's a funny story, that, because they dug this thing during COVID. There's no one around, and it's on an island where you can't have. There's no cars on this island. It's on one of the near Lombok there, and so they managed to get something to dig, and they dug this 3 million litre reservoir, I suppose. It's 3 meters deep by 65 by 60 or 50 or something. And then it was like, okay, now what? So they got in touch, and we sort of they lined it, and we went over and just did some pre-work, setting up where the filters would go, where the intake would go. There's a lot of, like, for us anyway. And then we'll get to that. And then they just now need to get the water to fill it, and then we'll go back at the end of the year, I think October, and get the pumps installed and build the wetlands, the upflow wetlands for it, and get it going. So back there again. Yeah. So Slowly. And I'm not pushing. It's not my intention to go out and do all these things. It's just really demand. Like I'm not chasing so much. I'm really just focusing now on projects that are really satisfying, that I really like the design side of it, that I know we can do really well, and the clients have good expectation. They understand, they understand it, or that they understand what we're saying, I suppose, when it comes to what's possible for budgets, because there aren't cheap exercises. There's a lot involved. It's not just a liner with some rocks around it and a pump stuck in the middle. There's so much more to it for it to function. And we build, it doesn't matter what size it is. You think about it being like a section of a creek or a river or a lake, and that's what we're replicating. We're replicating the flows through it as well. So you've got your filtration and you've got your intake bays or your skimmer areas. So you want to remove as much as you can of the floating material or organics that end up in there out of the system before it hits the bottom and becomes, causes the system to go eutrophic or nutrient rich, I suppose, where you start to get your water quality issues. I think with the upflow, another thing is the upflow wetland filters. That's another thing which is a little bit different from the normal filtration. They are wetlands, but when people think of wetlands, they're thinking of more of that sort of plants on top where water is sitting. We do very active oxygen-based or air, aerobic-based bacteria filters where the water's moving up through layers of different grades of stone, but we also put the water through at specific speeds. Like there's a too fast and too slow, because as the water moves into the bottom of it, there's a void, and that's where the sediments drop out, which you can pump out again later and do a backflush. And then it moves up through the stone, has really good contact with bacteria, and bacteria does the majority of the filtering. It's about 80%, and the plants are sort of secondary to a degree, so, and it moves from there. So that's the key to it. Very efficient filters. We don't work on 50% or 100% like the European ones. You work, minimum might be 10%. Like the larger the system is, the smaller the filters can be. Like Lake Gula on the Sunshine Coast is they're 10% size of the whole body of water.
So that's the wetland area. The filter wetland area is 10% of the whole surface area.
Yeah, the surface area. Yeah. So in this case, Lake Gula is an acre and a quarter or something. So we've got 500 square meters of wetland filter there. So on swimming ones, like the recreation ponds, we go more for more water quality. So we might go 20% or 25 or 30, depending on the environment. Like we have these in the tropics, and I make them a little bigger because there's a bit more going on. It's quite fast in the tropics, just to process it a bit quicker. But yeah, there's calculations, and that goes back down to the education of it and the reasoning. There's calculations for everything for it to be successful, and you have to nail it really and follow those for it to be successful. You can't just make it up. I suppose, yeah, so Lake Gula, that was a good example. We're getting a lot of data. There's not a lot of data out there when it comes to natural water features, like just on the water quality we can achieve. But we've had something good happen at Lake Gula. There's a group involved where they're doing water sampling of that. And so we have some fantastic water sampling for over 4 years now of the actual water quality. And it is, I think, coming back from the lab, they say it's better than most drinking water samples, that they get.
Right.
So it's incredible. And it deals with 25,000 to 30,000 people over like a 2-week, 2-week time, I suppose. And no bad, like coli is down. There's really no instance of any pathogens. The water quality is just fantastic. So it's a really good testing ground for this. And we're using that now. We're collating all of that to apply it to other projects to recuperate urban lakes and things like that. I think there's a saying in if you go into lake management groups, it's like the time to start maintaining or managing your lake is the day it was built or filled. And if you leave it, just watch it, they look fantastic for a while, but if they don't have the right systems in place, then they fail. I mean, 15 years, they're done, and there's a lot of work involved to get them back again. So we're sort of looking at different projects in Australia now as well, and we've just using that data to apply to those to see what we can do to solve some problems. So
yeah, I saw you did a post where there was like a heap of people in Lake Gula, and you said that's actually beneficial to have them in there splashing around in the water.
Yeah, it's one of the good things, recreation ponds and Lake Gula. Think about if you think of a nice healthy river system or lake or whatever, and you've got nice forest around it, and you get a big rainstorm and you get really nice water, clean water rushing through it, stirring it up and oxygenating the bottoms and moving any material that might have sunk. And that's key. So one of my recommendations for anyone who has recreation ponds or those things is actually flippering, getting in there and moving it, splashing. The more kids in there, the better, you know, or if you want to get some flippers and just flip on an angle and stir it up, that's the best thing you can do to sort of to mimic, I suppose, like a good clean flush of water through it that mixes it really well. So yeah, the water still goes a little bit turbid on Lake Beulah, you know, with so many people. You might have 700 people an hour in there, you know, spread across the whole thing, which is a lot. And so it might go a bit turbid. There's still a bit of material in the sand that gets kicked up. But by probably about 8 o'clock that night, after it's done, it's crystal clear again. And the next morning, it's just like it's just a beautiful thing. It just processes all of that. And it's the best thing. It brings up all that material, takes it into the intake bay, takes it to the filters where it all drops out. And then we're going to do one actually next week, a back flush on Lake Beulah, which is pumping the water out and washing water down through the stone while you're pumping it out to remove any accumulated material, you know. So yeah, it's the best thing to do. Give it a good mix. So,
and has that got a liner all through that?
Yeah, there's 9,600 square meters of EPDM rubber, 1.14 mil. You know, it's very thin when you think about it, but with tons and tons of rock. It's 12 million liters, that system. Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what you can achieve with the technique, and there is a plotting sort of way to it, and you kind of know when you've done it wrong. Like when a rock goes down, you know it's gone down wrong. Let's roll that one back and have a look. But with the liner that we use, it's really easy to fix. It takes 5 minutes. It's a patch, you know, you just go, did it, done, and you keep going. But we kind of always know, but it's very rare that would happen. And I haven't had one, a leaking system yet, you know, just through process. We use geotextile beneath and also above on the bigger ones, just for added. You don't have to go too thick. I mean, it's really, you know, 270 GSM is sort of the max we kind of use. If we need more, we might double it up. If there's sharper rock or working on top of shale, you can overdo it. In geotextiles, you don't really need to. It's really in the technique. If you've got skilled people, then there really is no issue, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, if you got a pointy rock, you're not going to put that face down into the
no. You can. There's a technique to doing that. So, because rocks don't actually. Sometimes we think, oh, that's how it should go in, but it's actually not. It's actually the other way, and that's what actually looks better. And so we have technique for putting in sharp stuff on top of things, you know. So there is a way of doing it, and yeah, there is a process to that too. So yeah.
So was there a time where you did have employees for Waterscapes?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had 6. So yeah, at the time, and it was really good. We did a lot of work. We're doing maybe 3, 4, 5 projects a month, sort of thing sometimes. So, and we did a lot of like creeks. Initially, it was all just more ornamental ponds and creeks and streams, pondless, things like that. I think it was 2011, no, 12 or 13. I did my first sort of consciously thought out recreation pond, which was that deeper body of water that was up in Cairns, and it was like, again, it was done, all these early projects were done very, very on the basics sort of, okay, we'll just, you know, cost-wise, I just wanted to do them. I wanted the experience of doing them to learn. I knew we can do them. And what we did was we just took the smaller pond thing and made it into a bigger one. And we learned from that there's certain things you can and cannot do as well, you know, like you don't do 300 mil edges. I mean, terrace around it, you go deeper, 500 mil just for water quality on those bigger ones. When it gets over, say, 100 square meters, you know, well, not even that, you know, if it gets past like a 6 by 8 pond, we'd take skimmers out of the equation and we put in intake bays. We might incorporate a skimmer into that intake bay, but we create a bigger skimming area and a bigger area for material to collect. And then that progressed into us also incorporating a skimmer in there, a pond skimmer, just so that you could automate the removal of the material that gathered in there in an easier way, so it didn't get sucked down through the system as much. And then from there, just started building. One was up near Cairns, near Mareeba. And then there was a friend of theirs, which said, okay, I've seen that. I want one. And that was down on the Mornington Peninsula. So we went down there and built one there. And then a friend of theirs was over at Merrick's and they wanted one as well. And then we had another one near Hanging Rock, actually. So another inquiry this is all sort of seeing from the social media or people who knew. And each one of those we developed very quickly. So we learned what was going to work and what wasn't not going to work, you know. So trial and error and just practicing, and also lots of observation and return just to see what was right and what was wrong in the process that we were doing to develop it into something which we could say this works. We now know the process of how to build them. With recreation ponds, I mean, people think of them as swimming pools, but there's more to them. You don't pull up a chair and sit there for hours and watch your swimming pool. Or maybe you do if you're like really, really into it. But I mean, with one of these water features. And when we say recreation, it's not really all about swimming. It's about how like it's gardening, it's ecology, it's sort of providing habitat for different species. It's so many different elements to it that make it so many more dimensions to it than a swimming pool. You know, at nighttime, put the lights on. It is like sitting next to a fire when you have a waterfall there. So it just brings these things. And in our design process, we think about all that. So one of the first things we do is actually go inside the house and say, well, you know, have a cup of tea and just have a look at the viewing areas. Where do you spend most of your time? Where's your kitchen? And, you know, maybe your bedroom, where do you look out from there? And then you design the water feature based on that. So different parts of the house or from inside and viewing areas that can see that. Because one of the things that sometimes happen that come back from people, I've got this hole down the back that holds water. It might be down the back fence line somewhere. Let's make a pond down there. You know, it's like there's two things wrong with that. One is it holds water, so it's probably the lowest point in the landscape, which means all the material or the water is going to go down there and make an issue because you want to create something that hasn't got runoff going into it. Because as soon as you have runoff going or surface runoff going into it, you're overcharging the system with nutrient and detritus and debris and things like that, which will affect the ecology of it. The other thing is, if it's down the back fence there, you're not really going to head down there all the time. You want it up in your living area, so it's a part of your living process and your lifestyle. So that was sort of key in the design process as well, like where we place the things and why. And when people hear that, oh, of course, yeah, okay, I understand that. You just need to point it out. So
yeah, and like what you said about the lighting, because garden lighting is one of the things I'll say that's underrated within landscaping. And like when you see it done on a pond, it just looks phenomenal. Like you said, it's like fire because you see it lights up the water that's moving, so it's kind of rippling on anything that it reflects on.
That's one part of it. You get that. It's not just on the water moving, it's also the ripple that comes off the top of the pond with the lights set up properly that then might go up a tree or up the side of the house or a landscape element in the actual garden and just opens this whole thing up. We say it's like there's a daytime pond and there's a nighttime pond because they're totally different creatures, you know. So yeah, and you don't want to overdo them. You want to keep it sort of subtle. So again, kind of like waterfalls. You don't want tall, big. We get it sometimes. I want this massive 2 meter high waterfall just crashing down. And it's like, well, that's after a while, it's pretty boring, really. And so what's more interesting is actually elongating it and taking it back further and changing the direction through the landscape. And then you're seeing it from different areas and different scales and different sort of side views, I suppose. And it's so much more interesting. Your eye catches so many different elements of it. It's a lot more interesting in the designing of them and also just the enjoyment. So
yeah, they're just beautiful to be around. Like I built one and like I loved it after I built it and thought it was awesome. But then I went back to the same job to do some more work. So there was a pondless waterfall on one side of the house, and I was working on the opposite side of the house, and I could hear it because it was reflecting. The noise was reflecting just off the fence. So it's just just a nice thing to sit around and hear.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. And you can use them also just to deaden out other sounds. If you've got a road or something nearby, you can actually take it into like killer bees or grey noise or whatever. It'll take that out of it, you know, and create a different atmosphere around the house. Have you got one? Have you built one at your place at all? Or
I'm in the process of it at the moment. And it was after building that one for a client, so I'm building one now, and it's in my front yard. So again, because I want to see it every day. And it's also outside my office. But we have a lot of people walk past our place, and I've got a creek across the road, like about 15 meters across the road. So I've also put in some sections because it's a pondless one, and I'll put in some sections where the water won't dry out, so that I might get some frogs coming across the road just to hang out in there, ideally. But yes, and again, I'm just sort of practicing with that one, and I've also got another hollow section out to try a couple of water plants in there to see how they go. But
I mean, the technique I like with creeks and even pondless is I actually dig backwards. So you dig back to the waterfall and you create that. I mean, when you think about water falling off something and hitting the blow, it digs it out and then it moves up and gets shallow again and then falls off again. So you create those pooling areas. And you can change the sound of the waterfall through how the water hits that as well, and how the rock shape and how it comes off it, and you can fine tune it. And one of the favorite things at the end of a project, I think, it is tweaking the waterfall, which is like just a couple of little stone here and there to make it fall how it needs to fall, and also to get the sound you want out of it. So, but definitely, a pondless doesn't have to be just a bare, like it goes dry. It can actually contain water, you know. So definitely, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh,
And it's,
and do anything you want. I mean, this is the thing. Anything you can imagine, you can do. This is the beauty of it, you know.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's what I love about it. Like I'm only new into it really, but it's just
mm,
such a fascinating thing. Like oh, there's so many good things within landscaping, but that's just another one that's come in that
yeah,
still think is underrated because there seems to be a lot of people who specialize in it, or not a lot, but there's people who specialize in it, and
mm,
then there's people who don't do it. There's sort of nothing in between. And I think the Aquascape system seems like an awesome thing because that's basically like it gives you everything you need for it.
the beauty about the Aquascape thing is it's not just another product off a shelf. I mean, it is a product, and I won't. That's the reality of it. Is that, but it's a means of actually building something, and where it comes from, it's not just something that's. I mean, it's manufactured, but it comes from a company where it actually builds them as well. So everything we're using has been tested and put in by their own teams, you know, so they're actually getting a lot of feedback. And so it's all this, anything that doesn't work is either redeveloped or made better. It's always upgrading and made better and easier to use. So it's not just, oh, you just get a pump and a bit of, here's a pressure filter and then you build your thing. There's a whole process to it, but there's also a whole lineage of experience in behind the project from the manufacturers who do it or who supply it. You know, that's what I loved about it as well. It's pond equipment built by pond builders. That's what it is, you know. So it's not trying to fit a round thing in a square hole and trying to explain it. You actually have that background there but behind each product. So yeah. And the systems themselves, how they go together and all the calculations that go behind it and the help that's there, you know. So that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
Was it challenging to when you first started to import it? Like,
It was because I mean there's the pumping thing. We had to eventually get to the point where we could bring the pumps in, but it was all 110 to 240, and I had to find a lot of stuff to make it happen over here. So and then got to the point where it could finally start to get minimum water quantities that we could actually start supplying all the thing. But it was a challenge. I mean, just finding rocks. I remember coming back. I was in Sydney. I think I came back to Sydney initially for some reason. And it was just trying to find rock. I remember calling up a landscape yard once. Have you got big rock there? I want it like, 500 and, 3 to 700 mil sort of thing. Yeah, we've got heaps of big rock. And I get there and there's a whole bay of potato stone. It's probably the biggest I got was 150 mil. And it was like, okay, so there's a real struggle finding stone. Like we deal with a couple of stone suppliers here and it's slowly growing. There's so many builders around the place now and identifying the quarries and where we get them from. And then once you're building an area, you develop a relationship with your suppliers and they end up knowing what you want. So send me a load of da-da-da-da-da. And they just know what you need from experience, you know. But those things, developing, I suppose, supply chains and identifying materials that we could use and getting the suppliers to understand what we needed was a challenge initially, definitely. So, yeah.
yeah, that's something I was wondering about. You know, when you're based in Queensland and you go into the Mornington Peninsula, like how do you get the subcontractors and how do you know who to use, let alone finding out where the best rocks are.
Yeah, well, through that, I mean, really, I just do a lot of investigation. It's from experience, like an investigate, get photos. Sometimes you go down and have a look, but then you just call around the suppliers and find it, and then go. It took some time, but I have quite a list now of all the suppliers around Australia. Now we know where to get it. Really nice rock from all over the place. Just learned thing, and all the guys know where they are. We share that all as well. You know, it's like, hey, you found any good rock? You know, it's like. We're like rock whispering in a way. We're always sort of on the lookout for really good rock. So, and we share that. There's no hiding any of those things. It's real because it comes down to the art of what you can do with it. That's what separates the men from the boys, I suppose. So it's like, and we want everyone to have good stone so they can really practice and really get good at it anyway. So everyone gets out there and does grows their skill. Grows their skill. It was I started in the GF in the financial crisis coming back to Australia. So one thing I found with water features is it just didn't seem, there was always the demand. There is always the demand from it. It seems to be that people who want them value them, and there's money there for them, I suppose, to invest. They want to invest that in their environment around them. So I didn't feel like it really surviving that. I really haven't looked back in a way. I mean, I just realized it's okay. Everything will keep going. There's always going to be demand for this niche area. And you're right, it hasn't really hit peak yet. It's still, still a lot of guys are not putting them into that. It's really up to the landscape architects or designers such as yourself, and let's say, like, let's incorporate and be able to show your client, because they can't understand them sometimes either. What do you mean? Because I get when people ask me what I do sometimes, what do you do? I build ponds, and either goes two directions. One is, oh, that's nice, and it moves on somewhere else, because what they're imagining is a hole in the ground with some rocks around it. So a lot of people, when they think of a water feature or a natural water feature, that's what they think of. It's a little thing in the ground with some rocks around it with a spurty fountain in the middle, so they don't, not thinking that it's actually like something that's pulled out of what looks like something that's been pulled out of the bush. And one of the comments we get is constantly is that it looks like it's always been there, and that's what we aim for, in our designing. You don't go overboard. You work with some specific sort of ratios of how water moves from a higher area to a lower area, how much sort of level areas beside that waterfall for it to actually look natural, because intrinsically we know if it feels wrong or right. We just feel it. When you look at something, it's like it either feels right or it feels wrong, so. And to make it look right, sometimes you don't even know why it feels right, but to be able to include that into the designing of it and how you build it, so you get that effect from people, is pretty incredible. Something else that happens in the design process, it goes through a bit of a stage when you're building at someone's place, even though they're aware of what you do. It's like very excited. You turn up and you start working, and they're all still as excited. And then you sort of get about 3/4 of the way through, and it looks like a bomb site, because it's like there's stuff everywhere. And I mean, you try and keep it as clean as possible. There's things happening. There's liner all over the place, sticking out, and there's piles of rocks, and it goes through a stage where they start to get really scared or really worried, I suppose. Oh my God, what have we made the right decision? What's this going to look like? And they sort of build up this emotional thing. And then at the end of it, it's like, there you are there. And we often have people crying, and it's a beautiful thing. It's just wonderful, because we love offering that experience to people. And it's like, there's such a big relief to the point where we finally bring the liner in, we've edged it properly, which is folding it carefully, not just laying it out, and done those touches to it. And there's just like this heaps of like this relief that shows itself. And you become friends. You can drop in any time and have a cup of tea with these, but they want you to come back. They really enjoy what you've brought to them, and that experience. And it makes it's quite an intense experience to build, not just for us. And sometimes we forget that because we've done quite a few. And even as landscapers, you need to sort of remember that this is a big thing for someone. They might be spending 5,000, might be spending 500,000, but might be this big thing that they're doing, which is the one thing they're going to do. And it's a massive thing for them. And you can't go in there blasé. You've got to be respectful, and you've got to understand that this is not just another job. It's just someone's, putting their hopes in your hands, So you really have to remember that every time. So it's okay, you got to treat it almost like it's the first job every time, and that you're putting everything into it and respecting your client in that manner, and that it's not just another job for you to be getting out of there again, so.
Yeah. I've said that exact thing probably half a dozen times on this podcast, that it's easier to get caught up thinking you're just doing work and go and finish this job, then go on the next job.
Yeah.
But someone's probably been waiting for you for 12 months to start their project, and they're only going to do that once in their life, spend that much money on a project. So it's good to stop and think that every now and then, to realize that what you're doing for people.
Yes. Yeah. And you are doing, as landscapers and creative types and doing this, it's incredible what we do. Everyone in the industry, the landscape industry, what we can pull out of the air and build, and the passion that you put into it. It's pretty incredible what's happening in Australia. I'm really excited about the industry, and everything that everyone's doing, not just the water feature side of it. It's pretty incredible. So many aspects of things, really inspiring to me as well. So.
And do you think the horticultural side helped you with like making your pond look unique as well? Like, did you put a lot of paint in the water?
I just threw a shirt on and jumped up here. I'm just out at the warehouse now. We built a feature there that actually Jan Taylor and Lee Keeland put the design together. We designed it. I've just been out planting it now. So horticulture, definitely understanding that. I also had a keen interest in ecology and I love aquatic life, but not only that, it's just like environmentalism and things like that, which came together in this perfect little sort of storm of water features. So definitely horticulture and some kind of background in that is really helpful. Saying that, in the pond business that we have people who are accountants or IT. Ben Harris, for example, was an IT specialist, but he went and studied horticulture then and started doing and brought it into it now more on the pond side of things. So there's lots of different backgrounds that come into this because it is fulfilling, but I will say that having some kind of knowledge of landscaping and plants and that kind of thing is probably really important and probably good to look for in a contractor if you're finding one, especially in this side of it, because then it is how do you incorporate the landscape into what you've done, depending on what package you're offering. Are you just doing the water feature side of it and you're going to plant it, or in that case you still leave those spaces and you might explain if it's being to the client or maybe to the overarching project manager or company that's building it, what would go with the water feature there. And even better if you get the whole landscape, then you can make it how you see it really. That rock's there for a reason, and there's a space there for a reason, and that's the plant that goes with it, So, yeah.
So when you're designing a pond or water feature, how detailed is your actual design compared to just sort of making it up? Like you'll have a brief outline of where it's going to go, but just sort of making up with the rocks that you get and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it depends on the project. Look, some people really need, I suppose some people need designs, and we sort of realize that I don't do a lot of design, actual layouts I do a layout for maybe do a layout, a bubble drawing or something like that as a basic. We know how big, we have to quantify how big it is and what elements are involved to be able to, say how much rock we need. We have calculations for how much rock we need, what kind of pumping we need, what kind of flow rates and how much liner. So we know how big it's going to be and what the elements are. And if I think at this point, people just look at your work we've done and just say, okay, well, we can do a drawing with you. We kind of have to charge you for it because it's our time, I suppose, to do it. Do you really want one? We're more than happy to do it, but it's going to be more of an artist impression of what it would be, I suppose. And you can't go into detail because the rock do speak to you as you get them. You know the size of the rock you need. And as you build, you place as you go. There's going to be a floating rock or a destination stone, and there's going to be a peninsula, and there'll be maybe 2 or 3 or 4 waterfalls. And you need a couple of big stone in there to scale it. And so that's what you need. And then when it comes to building it, it's going to be something that happens at the time, So, and saying that, there's a few things changing. Like I am actually working now with Ben Harris. We've started another business called Waterscape Design, totally separate from Waterscapes Australia and Aquascape. And we're offering a design service for landscapers and not just landscapers, civil companies, architect firms and things like that, actually doing in-depth drawings and schematics on the systems and how to actually to incorporate those into CAD plans and things like that so that they can be attended on properly. And I think also there's a bit more happening now with councils being involved. They want more detail on the projects going in the ground, especially on different states have different requirements for water features. And so there's a lot more demand. Architectural firms are working with a firm now on some pretty exciting projects overseas, providing the specialty. We're realizing we have a specialty that's not there, that hasn't been able to be provided before. So we're just offering that out there as a service. Because I think it happened for me. Still happens to me. I still get plans sent in from projects and they've already been designed and already approved and the whole thing. And it's like a concrete, they want a natural thing, but then it's a concrete thing with an external massive pump with, it's all kind of done on 80 sort of, and it's just because that's what's known by the specifiers. It's no one's fault. It's just what the industry is back there. And they haven't actually, it's probably our fault for not exposing people more to it, so, but, education is what it is. So it's being able to go in now and actually provide water quality details and data on what we can actually achieve and actually also do schematic and detailed plans for people or for industry bodies or whatever it is so that they can see that it's got legs to it, and got structure to it. So yeah. So I don't do a lot of designs. If I do it with Ben Harris. I'm the creative type, so I just I'll sketch it out quite quickly, and then Ben Harris, if they want more detail, he will bring it up into a more intricate scale plan if they want it. So yeah,
it's an awesome idea, and even because, like you said, it comes down the more people doing it will come down to people designing them in. So. I have a lot of people try and sell me stuff, like get me to use their products as a landscaper, but I tell them that you need to talk to people who are doing the designs because I just build what gets designed.
Yeah.
And we've, because I want to do more of these, we've designed 2 of them in upcoming projects. So I reckon it's good for if people aren't really sure what they're doing, like there could be a landscape architect company who want to use more, and then they can do the whole, the project, but in conjunction with you doing those designs.
Well, in those, if someone's got a design or they're pulling a design together or getting one up, we often just say, just make the place for the water, just outline it and leave it in the landscape and give it a scale in there. And then, okay, we know what the levels are and if you want so many waterfalls through it and that kind of thing. And that's about all the detail you kind of need. And then we kind of specify you need water and power to the bottom end of it. Oftentimes we get people think the pumps at the top and all these sorts of things. So it says like water and power, drainage point for overflow, that happens. And then you don't have to go do detail with it. It can just be a pretty simple drawing within the landscape, and then bring in one of the guys, like myself or someone, and say, yes, we can do that. And we can actually estimate it all up from there based on how much material you need and using that footprint. So we just need a bit of a brief really about basically say, what are the feelings involved with this water feature? What is the client, what wants to be achieved here? It's not just a water feature. There's reasons for it, so ask those questions. Yeah.
And Ben is still in Melbourne, is he? So you're doing that?
He's moved to the rural. He's gone off social media, Ben. He's just doing his thing. He's doing amazing stuff. He's very good, Ben. He works. He's went to Japan and did a little bit of stuff there as well, just to learn a bit. But he's in up near the border of New South Wales, Victoria, somewhere at Chuka or something like that. So he's working remotely, still doing projects around the place, but just as he wants. So, and we're doing more, like I said, more design work, more lab work. Design lab, I suppose, stuff with him now, so which is exciting. Really excited about it. I mean, I'm 56, going on 57 now, so it's looking at what happens now. I love to keep physical and keep my hand in as much as possible on the builds, but it's more about kind of directing them and orchestrating and managing them, I suppose. I do get in there and do some things still, but then looking into the future of how we can bring this information into the industry better and make it more available, I suppose, and give that service so that water features continue to be built in the way that we have been, So yeah, Ben's fantastic. I love working with Ben. He's really good.
Awesome. He's an awesome fella.
Yeah.
Couldn't love him anymore.
Yeah.
Last question for you, Patrick, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
Have you done Ben Harris yet?
I haven't, no.
I think you should talk to Ben Harris.
All right, I will.
Yeah. Well, there's two people actually. You've Ben Harris, and then you've got Daniel Taylor, who's come a long way actually in the last 6 years. So he's Daniel Taylor on the Sunshine Coast here as well. So yeah.
Is he got a business name? Or
Tailored Waterscapes. So.
Oh, yep. I reckon I've seen that.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I was looking forward to this chat as soon as you said agreed to come on. So I can't thank you enough for coming on, and looking forward to following along with more of your beautiful projects.
Thank you so much, man. I'm really excited about what's happening in the future, and I'm really it's fantastic what you're doing for the industry too. It's just really nice to be able to see and hear other people's perspectives and in the skill set they've got. It's fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity.